talk about the RF switch. Now, the back of the Nintendo has an RCA plug on the back where the RF switch plugs into. There's some problems that can be associated with that, which we'll cover later when we handle the control deck. But typically what happens, just like the controller cord, there's an RCA cord on the end of this. The RCA cord gets bent back and forth, put in here and gets bent back and forth, and you get a bad connection here, or you have an animal that chews on it. Now, and you've attached the RF switch properly to the television. You have your antenna coming in here and this going out to your TV, plugging into your television. What will happen is when there's no power here, there's two transistors in here that are switching transistors, that when power is applied here, it actually cuts off this path to the television and redirects the Nintendo into the television, so that you now have electricity flowing in this direction while the antenna is shut off. Once the Nintendo is powered down, it turns this off and reconnects the direction to this direction into the television, so your antenna is hooked right back up to your television. Of all the units that I've repaired, the most common problem, again, is cord damage. If the cord is damaged somewhere in the middle, somewhere close to this, you can take the top off of this and shorten it. Again, cutting it here and shorting it here. It's a little tricky to get it back in here. If the cord is damaged on this end, again, you can cut it here, pull it short, and go into your neighborhood Radio Shack dealer. You can purchase an RCA plug to put on the end of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually replace this one to show you how to replace the end. Again, for those of you that are advanced and want to get to the control unit, you may want to fast forward. But for those of you that need this, I'm going to go through it. The other problem that I've seen, if you check this coax, it's also damaged, and you'll find that this tip has either been bent or broke off. Usually what I do in that case is I go down to a VCR shop and I buy a patch cord, and I simply take them that are preformed and I cut off about 6 inches of the end of one of the patch cords, F connector to F connector patch cord, and I cut it and solder it back into here. And so I replace this whole piece right here. And again, I'll show you how to do that in a moment. Most of the time the RF switch is pretty reliable. I've never yet, of the 200 or some that I've done to date, I've never yet had to replace anything, knock on wood, anything inside this. So that's the theory behind the RF switch. Again, what you'll need to replace the RCA plug on the end, wire cutters, wire strippers, you'll need a little roll of solder, and then what I use are Radio Shack catalog number 274339. It's a set of metal shielded phono plugs. These are a little tighter going in than these are, and a little more difficult to take out, but as you use them they get a little easier to use. So I'm going to lay that down, and I'm going to open up the pack and pull out one of these RCA jacks. Now, you'll notice that there's two pieces to it. The shield comes off, and you normally want to set that aside. Now, again, find the point where it's damaged. If this itself is damaged, you'll want to cut it off just as close to that as you can. But again, let's say that the damage occurs somewhere in here. There's a cat bite or a dog bite or a cut or a burn, or it's been on the lamp or something, and it's right in here. So what we'll do is we'll cut it just past the cut. The cut would be up in here, and again we throw that portion away. What we want to do now is we want to take, and this is kind of tricky, you want to strip off enough so that the center lead, and I'll show you why that's necessary in just a minute, you want to strip off enough so that the center lead extends completely through that. So what I usually do is lay it next to it and measure it off, and then strip off enough so that that whole thing comes off at one time. It's kind of tricky and it takes a little practice to do it, but you want to cut through the coax and the shield, but leaving the inner portion intact so that you don't get a breach of insulation here. Then you want to come back about 1/4 of an inch and remove just the insulation from the shield, leaving the shield intact here, if we can get it. There we go. So now we've got about 1/4 inch of shield there, and we have our wire up front. Now the wire will, the center of the coax will fit through, but you'll need to strip off about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch of that in order for it to protrude through the end of the connector. Now don't forget to slide the shield over the end of it. So slide the shield over the end so it's on there. And sometimes what I do is I tie a little knot right here so that the shield doesn't go sliding all the way down, and it's kind of a nuisance to have to get that a little later. So that's what it should look like, something like that. Now some people prefer, rather than to just hold the shield on with a crimp, to solder it. It's up to you, whichever you want to do. What I'll usually do is insert that through like that. You'll notice that it's sticking out of the end. Again, I prop my solder up so that I don't need 3 hands here. And you apply enough solder to completely close in the end, so that as you look down into the RCA jack, it's enclosed and there's no openings down in here. You then cut off the end of the wire that was sticking out, and you've got a good solid connection there. What I usually then do is rotate the end so that the shield is in contact like this, and this is where you'll need a pair of needle nose pliers. Take your needle nose and bend the edges down like that. Bend the edges down so that they're making good contact. So now you've got not only an electrical connection, hopefully, with the ground, but also you've got a mechanical connection with a strain relief. So then you can pull the shield back up and screw it back on. So now you've got a new end on the end of the RF switch where the old was bad, and you've now effected repair. Again, about $5 is a fair fee to charge to do a repair on one of those, since a new one is about $10. The tricky part comes when you get to this end of the RF switch. Inside is some small screws that need to be taken out, and I'll show you what's inside this. So we'll hurry here and take the screws out. Okay, remove the cover. You'll notice it's a pretty simple device. It just slides right out. Move the bottom cover out, and here's the circuit board. Again, what you've got a couple transistors, switching transistors here. You've got the TV signal coming in. I'm sorry, you've got the antenna coming in this direction, and the TV going out this direction, and the Nintendo coming in here. And what happens is when power is applied to here, these 3 transistors switch and cut this off and send the signal from the Nintendo out to your television while your switch is cut off, and it provides enough isolation that the FCC is okayed it, that it will work okay. So it's a very unique device. But again, you don't need to use this if you don't mind using the manual switch. Now usually what happens is if it breaks here or in here, you can desolder this, and I'll take you through that here real quick, or desolder this. This is again a little more tricky. Under here there's a shield that not only provides an electrical connection but a mechanical connection so that it's hooked to the circuit board and doesn't move around a lot. Same here, as you can see, but this one is covered up with some heat shrink. This one is just exposed. So what I usually do is you lay that down, again, get your solder wick and get a good clean piece of it here. Am I getting to the end here? No, it just was attached. So get a good clean piece of your solder wick, clean the tip, and apply it to the area. Big enough piece that it's taken actually. Now there's two connections here that hold on the shield, and there's one connection here that holds the tip in. So you actually have to remove, desolder 3 positions. Now inadvertently, by heating this up, I melted and desoldered this connection. So we're going to have to make sure you look for that and repair any desoldering that you didn't intend to do. So here we now attach it, or apply it to this end of it, and we desolder that properly, and we'll desolder the tip. Okay, so now that it's all been desoldered, you can pull it right out. I don't know if you can notice the close-up here, but you'll notice on the close-up that you have a metal shield here that's holding the outside, and you have the center portion coming through here. So what you want to do, you want to bend these back, bend both of those back, try not to break it, bend that back, bend that one back, and then cut and strip identical to the way it is there. You may want to clip this off as a model. So we'll bend those back, being careful not to damage it, as I mentioned. And the way to bend them back is, I usually take my wire cutters and just kind of inch them through like that, and that gives me enough to where I can pull it through, pull it back. And again, same thing up here, forcing it through, it gives me enough. So I've been able to keep the shield here. I did a little damage to that, but that's alright. We're not going to need that anyway. So theoretically we would cut this just prior to, or just above, just below where the damage has occurred, and would throw the bad part away. Now laying this next to the part we want, what we want to do is we want to strip and insulate, strip the insulation identical to that. So what we'll do is this one here we want to cut right through to the center. So we'll pull that one off. We left a few little braids here that we're going to cut off with our wire clippers. So we'll pull that back with our wire clippers and cut those off. So now we have that much sticking out, just like that. And what we want to do is strip the insulation off the center there. Now what I like to do right here is to tin that part to give it a little consistency so it doesn't bend around and unravel while you're working on it. So now that that's tinned, what we want to do is we want to come back about a 1/4 of an inch, leaving enough insulation for it to make a firm mechanical connection, but taking enough away that it makes a good electrical connection. So there we have it. And now what we'll do is we'll lay that directly back down in, right where we pulled it out of, just right where we pulled it out of, okay, and using the needle nose, we'll crimp it back together, just like where we took it from, and there you have it. You have your end right back right from where we started. Bend that piece over. You've got a triple solder joint now. Throw that away. And it fits right back down in to where it pulled out of. See? So we've got a good mechanical connection. Make sure that your braids are cut off or back to where they're supposed to be. Okay, now you've got a triple solder joint to redo. So resolder the center portion of the coax, and now we're going to resolder the strain relief ground part of it. Let it cool down. Cut off any excess that might exist, and there you have it. You have a good connection. Cut off. You'd repeat the same procedure up here. I don't usually put the heat shrink back on around it. Repeat the same procedure here that we did here with this portion. Now you can do a couple things. This coax is not a solid center coax. It's a braided center. So unlike most coax cables, you can't just get an F connector, cut this off, strip it back, and put a new one on, because the center is braided. So that the center needs to be rigid enough to fit inside. So you can either pull this one off and get a coax that is rigid and reuse it, or you can pull this one off and go down, like I said, to a video place, or if you've got one laying around, just cut off about 6 inches of a VCR cord and reuse it. We'll check this one for continuity. Check this end. Touch it there. Touch it here. Getting good continuity. And touch it to the shield. Touch it to the shield, and we're getting continuity there. So we know now that the switch is good and that the cables are good. If there is a back upside down like it was when we pulled it out, making sure that the square end of this slides into the notch here to give it the proper relief. Feed this wire through this hole, feed that wire through that hole, and then we replace the top, making sure that it's there, and secure all screws.